Well, welcome to Rob's Fix-It Shop. I have something very cool. A friend of mine brought this over and he wanted me to check it out. And it's a Tektronix TDS 420A oscilloscope. And I think it's from about 1996, and it was really the cream of the crop in its day. And it seems to work pretty well. And so I got, it's one of the first really nice digital oscilloscopes, and I can, let's see, switch it on. So it's from about 1996, and it's one of the first really nice digital oscilloscopes, and it's 4 channels. It's quite the oscilloscope, but I mean, it's nothing compared to the modern ones that you can get for under $600, but yeah. But it works pretty well. Some of these earlier models of these guys had a lot of problems with the capacitors, and this one's not having that problem. And it's got little problems like the screen is a little bit out of kilter. It's a little bit too dark when you set it kind of to the initial settings, but otherwise it seems to work really well. And but as I was kind of looking at this guy and researching it, I found this guy who was able to kind of download the firmware from here, disassemble it, and figure out how to set the options on this guy, because this one has does not have the math option, which gives you FFT. It does not have the ability to trigger on certain TV signals, which is kind of worthless, and it also doesn't have the full memory complement. So I think what I want to do in this video is I want to kind of take the article that this guy wrote and the work that he had done, and I want to show it in video form how to kind of upgrade this box, connect to the serial port, do the commands to kind of upgrade to the FFT option. And I bought some memory chips. I want to solder in some new memory, the expanded memory chips, and then set the options for the memory chips too. And so I don't know, I think it'll be a fun video. So if you're interested, hang on and we'll get to it. So here's the article that I found that talks, this guy, Tom Verbuer, he just did a really cool job of taking a deep dive looking at this oscilloscope, and I'll put the link to his article down below, and be sure to take a look at it if you're interested in it. But it's really interesting, and he talks all about the scope, getting his own, and what he wanted to do with it. And here we see a picture of the scope with the FFT. And so what he's talking about is the different options that come along with this scope. And scope 1M is 120,000 sample points, and it starts default about 30,000. That's something I want to change. The advanced DSP math, that's the FFT. I want to change that as well. And optional 5 is video triggering interface. We can do that, but it's not, you know, how often do you work on old TVs? And so those are the 3 options I think we can turn on. And the memory one, you actually have to have the memory, right? So we'll have to solder some memory on there. But yeah, so that's what we're going to be looking at. And so let's take a look at the scope. So here's the startup of the scope. And here I've got the VGA from the scope feeding right into my acquisition board or acquisition card, and it's quite a long startup. There it's got the floppy disk it's going through, and still working. And then we can see it's just got the one option for 1F, which is the floppy drive. And so we want to see that options thing. And this has got the copyright of 1996. So a lot of these scopes that had problems with their capacitors. My understanding is that by 1996 they had taken care of these problems, and I'm not having any of those problems. All right, so here I just have a 2 megahertz signal. It's got a lot of really good measurements on it. I'm going to put frequency and let's see, does it have RMS? RMS on there. So yeah, so it's got good measurements on there, and you can just see it's working. I just kind of wanted to show the basic operation. So you do have a math reference here, and right now you've got math channel 1 plus channel 2, and math channel 1 minus channel 2, and then math 3, which is invert channel 1. And here, let me bring something into channel 2 and we'll see that. Okay, so I just have 2 signals coming in to the scope. I think they're 500 kilohertz. We can see that. Switch to channel 1, measure, frequency, and peak to peak, which is cool, right? And so let's look at the math functions first. So if I select more or math, you can actually display 3 different math functions, and you can set up what each of these 3 are. Let's just say channel 1 minus channel 2. And so you can see the math functions there, but you can see that there's nothing for FFT here, right? So, so that's one of the things we want to enable. And so the other thing then is we want to if we look at our horizontal menu, let's go to record length. So right now, so the record length is how much data you actually store. And so that, I think right now, we're 500 points. And 500 points in 10 divisions, that's going to give you the best kind of motion on the screen. And but if we go back and forth, we only have that much data, right? And so that if we select 1,000 points, right, it's a little bit, doesn't show quite as nice, but then we stop, we can see if you look right at the top, there's that that bar that's moving. That's showing us where we are. We've got, now 3 times as much data. And then if we go to 30,000 points, right, and then run, you can see that our update on the screen is pretty slow. But if we stop, then we've got just a lot of data going on there. Right, because you see the top, you see those little brackets, they're showing what you're looking at, and the bar is showing you kind of the full range of the data. But if you look, there's 60,000 and then 120,000. So that's the other thing, is we want to put in the extra memory to see if we can get up to 120,000. And the last thing is that if you go to the trigger menu, right now we have trigger type edge, and you can see that there's a trigger type for video there that's not enabled. So we'll enable that too, because that's kind of a freebie. So again, here's an article that Tom has up about connecting to the serial debug console, and so that's what we're going to do. And here he kind of shows how to connect to that port and where it is. And I would recommend looking at his article as opposed to me trying to describe it all, but so this oscilloscope runs an operating system called wxworks, and it's kind of an embedded operating system that allows many threads and preemptive multitasking and such. On this scope, it actually has a console window, and from that console window, so embedded in the firmware is a symbol table of all the function locations in the code. And from that console, you can actually, because it's got a map of the functions to the code, you can actually call different subroutines in the embedded code, right? And so what was done is that they, this Tom guy downloaded the, come on. The console window then is able to, I think I'm missing a screw here. What am I missing? Okay, that's got to go out the front. Right, so it goes out the front. So that then by connecting to that console window, you can actually type in different subroutines and run them and execute different functions. So what we're going to do is use some of those functions that Tom found to write in the codes that we need to enable the different options, because to see if the options are on or not, the embedded code is just looking at some memory locations and based on those memory locations saying whether it's enabled or not. All right, so let's get connected to that that serial port. So here's our parameters, and then if we go over and look at the device. All right, so here's my little using a big clamp to hold that serial port down, and I've just got some pins. I'm using transmit and receive and ground, and so this is just the wiring diagram here. We see this connector here, and we're connected to 2 and 6 and 8, and we have receive and transmit and ground on our DB9. And I don't know if it was just me, but I have a number of different serial to USB devices, and not all of them worked on this, which I don't get, right? Usually serial stuff, you know, isn't too hard for me to get to work, but this one was a lot of kind of farting around, but I don't know. The wiring itself was pretty simple. Anyways, so that's how I've got it hooked up. So now let's bring up our terminal. Okay, so I'm just using putty, and let's open that up. And switch the device on. Now we start to see the operating system loading. Going through a bunch of checks. And this is that wxworks operating system. And there it's going, you can hear it, it's kind of trying to hit the floppy drive. And then it does complain that it can't find the floppy drive, which makes sense, right? And then it just sits there, and then if I hit enter, I get a command prompt, right? So now wxworks, this is kind of a command console, is just kind of sitting there, so I can say I, and that'll tell me all the running processes. So this is very, very cool, right? And so then So let's look at those again. We're going to try enabling these options. So let's take a look at that again. And again, so here's Tom Verbure's blog. And so he talks all about option 5, 13, 1F, 2F, and 1M, right? And so I don't have the Tektronix hard copy board, but I want to enable 2F, the advanced DSP math, and the sample points and the video trigger. And so what he's done is he's downloaded the firmware and he's reverse engineered it using Jidra? I don't know. And so he's come up with the code like this. And because the code actually has, because it's got a command prompt where you can type in the function name, it's actually got the function pointers in the map table in it. So yeah, that's all very cool, right? And so that here's the function for finding out whether you have the TV trigger present, right? So all it's really doing is it's looking for the word at the memory location 50,007, right? And so yeah, so we just need to set a value at 50,007 to turn that on. So that's cool. And then the advanced DSP math, that's at 5009, right? So here he's just got these two lines here that we're going to type in to turn it on. Okay, so first let's look at the advanced DSP math. And so here's the method for querying whether it's present or not. And we see where it's looking up at memory address 5009, obviously hex. And so down here then it just says how to set that value, right? So let's try querying it first. So if we go underscore hardware probe math, we get 0, right? Not enabled. So now let's take this and set it to 1. Okay, now we've set it to 1. Now if we do this again, the mathpat present, it's 1. So that's all it took to enable the DSP math. Now let's do the video trigger. All right, so I think that's all it really takes. So let's try booting it up again and see if it's got those two options. And there's our two options, the 1F and the 2F. So cool. Okay, so FFT, sweet. That's cool. Okay, hang on. That's pretty cool. So I just put a 10 kilohertz signal in it. Let me put it in square wave, and then we should see some odd ordered harmonics come up. Yep. So I haven't looked at how to do the FFT on here, but that's pretty cool. Now let's look at our trigger menu and type. Yep, and then we have video there. Well, that's very cool. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to mess with the memory, but that's a lot more involved. I have to solder on memory chips, but I think so let's solder on the memory chips first, and then hopefully we won't wreck the scope, but we'll solder on the memory chips, and then we have to set a flag the same way we did with these options to turn on the memory. So let's do that. So the board we're looking at is this one right here. So we got to pull these guys out, and okay, so let me just, these just clip out like this. Okay, and that, now the boards are loose in there. And then we have to pull this guy out. Okay, that came out, and then we got our battery over here. We'll pull that out. We don't want to disconnect it, although, you know, people say that you're going to lose all your calibration and stuff, but the service manual didn't say that. But all right, and I pulled that screw out over there too. So there's a screw in the back here, and one down there. And you got to pull those out. I had those out earlier. And there's our board. Okay, set that aside. So here's the part I ordered. I hope it works. It's quite a bit faster than the chip that's in there, but I think it'll work. I mean, it looks all the pinouts and everything else seems the same. Other than it's a lot faster, but yeah, we'll try soldering them in there and see if it works. So I think the interesting thing is there's already solder on here, and so I could take a heat gun all around here and probably get those to solder pretty well. If I don't use a heat gun, then I'm gonna have to, I think I'm gonna lift that solder off and then just do it with the soldering iron. And let's see, let me try it with the heat gun first. And then okay, so that's just a little crooked on there, but it did go on pretty good, so I'm going to put them all on like that. I think that worked pretty well. So, I don't know, the hot air gun, that hasn't been working great for me, and part of it is my hands are kind of shaky tonight because I'm using the weed whip today. So I found it works a little bit better if you just pull the solder up, and so that it, because the solder kind of creates kind of a bump, and just get a little solder wick and pull up those solder traces, solder pads. Both of them here. Right, okay. And we'll get our little chip. A little more flux. Now obviously we'll have to inspect that, but that generally works a lot better than the hot air, which I tended to have. I had to use a lot of hot air on that, so yeah, so that's the way I think I'd recommend doing it. Okay, there's our board back in, and I'm not going to fasten it down. I don't know if it works. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, let's flip it on. Uh-oh. Diagnostic. Let me try setting that memory location. So there's a memory location that tells it that it has the extra memory. So I'm going to try setting that. Okay, so that sets it to the higher memory. Let's try it again. Looks like it passed. Oh, I can't believe it. Okay. So you have to put the memory in, but you also need to set the flag. All right, well let's switch over to the scope. And we've got the 1M option there. So let's take a look. So if I go, let's see. I want my horizontal menu, record length, and then 120,000 points. Look at that. Let me put a signal in and we'll see if it works. Okay, so here I just have a signal coming in, and if I say stop, you can see that right where at the top of the screen where it says 250 acquisitions, I always do the wrong thing, how small that is. Yeah, that's a lot of data. That's cool. Looks like it's working. I don't know how you get over there faster, right? Yeah, I'll be at this all day. That's cool. Looks like it works. Okay, there's just a couple other things I want to fix on here. One is that the screen's kind of crooked. And the other is that when you just reset from factory, it's not very bright, right? Looks a little bit brighter here because it's kind of in the dark. But if we look at the service manual, it shows these controls here, and this one here is for brightness. And yeah, so I'm going to try turning that up a little bit and see if I can get it to be bright, because what I was doing before is I was going in and turning the brightness way up in the settings, but I think this should start at a higher point. And then the other thing is that it's crooked, and I just want to kind of change the yoke a little bit to change that crookedness. And so of course all the warnings apply to high voltage and such, but here if I just take my yoke adjusting chopstick, you can see that the yoke is really loose on there. And so I'm just going to get it to where it's good, and then I'm going to shut it off, and I'll just tighten it with a screwdriver then. Nope. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to shut it off. Or let's adjust the brightness. I can tighten. The yoke's got a little screw right down here that needs to be tightened because it's kind of loose on here. But let's see if I can adjust this brightness a little bit. Yeah, cool. All right, what is the other one? Video gain? I wonder what that does. Yeah, that's perfect there. Oh, yeah, nice. And then that's it. So I'm going to tighten that yoke and put it back together. That looks a little funky on the camera, but it looks good to me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Here's a better look at the FFT. And you can see along the bottom of the screen, it does show you it's 20 decibels per division and 5 megahertz. It doesn't seem to go above 5 megahertz, but the signal I've got coming in right now is 2 megahertz. And then if I have my cursor, whoop, no, that's no. If I have my cursor and come over here and see that's my 2 megahertz. You can see right at the top of the screen it shows where that is. And here, 6 megahertz, right? Because it's square wave. 10, 14, 18, 21. So that's pretty cool, right? Let me try putting it slower. Let's say 20 kilohertz. There we go. Huh. Yeah, that looks pretty nice. Actually, whoops, god darn it, I always... So right now get rid of this. Right now I'm at 20 kilohertz. Yep. 20 kilohertz. 40, the odd harmonic, 60, even. Yeah, that's cool. Let me try really slowing it down. So that's That's 200 hertz. Whoops. Yeah, that looks really nice. But yeah, I just wanted to take a look at the FFT, and you know, seems to work. It also works in the low frequencies, which I think is cool, because I think, you know, if you're gonna have a scope like this, you're not going to be doing high-end work, but like, let's say you're doing audio stuff, that's when you want to see that FFT to see, you know, distortion. Well, that's it for Rob's Fix-A-Shop with this really cool TDS 420A oscilloscope. I just love working with this Tektronix stuff. I mean, the build quality is so nice, and it's just, I don't know, it's a cool scope, and it was kind of fun to get into the guts and read a lot of articles about, you know, how the firmware has been hacked, and being able to go in and do that myself. It's just kind of a pretty fun thing to do. So if you like the video, please hit like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.